feels like this burden, and it feels no matter where you're at, it's not enough. Like no matter where you're at, whatever your expectation is. So I would say that the need, like this pressure to figure out how you're gonna get rich in your
Mm-hmm.
20s is like
Yeah.
a thing that constantly comes up.
Like just having the answer ready.
hmm Yeah, exactly. And it's like if you got a job at whatever insert random company, like the perspective is like, oh, you're just going to stay there for the rest of your
Mhm.
life, work your way up, and then eventually be the CEO of that company. That's like your path towards financial galore. Hello, and welcome back to It's Only Up From Here. Abel, it's good to see you, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing super well, man. It's good to see you as well. It's been quite a while since I've seen you in so many pixels. Like you look fantastic in 4K, man. How have you been?
I've been good, thank you. This is probably the only setup that makes me look this good.
There you
So
go.
at least it's paying off. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It has been a while, and I figured if we're going to do this, we should probably just skip all of the faff where we kind of apologize to our
Mhm.
listeners. Maybe we still have a few, but skip through this, explaining of ourselves of, why we haven't recorded or published in a while, and instead just get back right into our lives as if we recorded last week. So why don't you fill us in on what has happened in your life since we last recorded? Which was, by the way, which was January of 2023.
And we make no apologies because we're not sorry. Essentially, I think the biggest thing that's happened since then is that I have moved. I no longer live in Winnipeg, as much as a lot of people think I still do because I'm there so often. I counted, and I think this year alone, I made like 5 or 6 trips back to Winnipeg, and spent over a quarter of the year actually in Winnipeg. In one or another. Like it's a bit mad, but anyway, I live in Montreal. I moved to Montreal in November of last year, so just celebrated my 1 year anniversary a few weeks ago, and um, that's kind of a big thing on my side, just because it's first of all it's a French province. I don't know why I moved here.
Yeah.
Before I spoke French. That's definitely been interesting. It's interesting. It's fairly anglophone. Montreal is fairly anglophone, but I think just on the social side, it's a bit difficult sometimes to like integrate with people when everyone is a francophone and like they're speaking French. I don't want to be the one guy in the group who's like, "Hey guys, can we please speak English?" So yeah, that's been a bit challenging, but man, I love this province. I had such a phenomenal summer. Luckily, pretty much all my friends love this province. I've had so many visitors. I saw you in the summertime here for a weekend, which was fantastic. We had a dinner. We went to a rave kind of situation at Oshiaga. Like it has been, it's been a really fun year. It's been fulfilling. It's been challenging. I think that um, you probably experienced this, I guess, when you moved when you're in university. But it just once you're no longer in the place where like you've spent so much time, where you're so comfortable, where you know all the streets, it kind of forces you to change as a person. It was a bit lonely initially, but the loneliness is almost a good thing. So yeah, it's just been getting accustomed to my new normal here, and yeah, I've been really enjoying it, man. It's been fantastic.
That's cool. So, I mean, what made you want to bounce? Actually, before that, I should say that that's kind of partly the reason as to why we are kind of picking this back up and doing this again is because and actually doing it in this fashion, right? We have obviously for our longtime fans and listeners, you can actually watch this now on YouTube. This is not only our first episode in 17 months, but it's also our first ever actual video episode. And if you would like to see our faces uh, actually talking to each other, you can go and watch this on YouTube. Or actually, I guess we might upload it on Spotify where you can actually,
Potentially,
because
yeah.
there's video on Spotify. So we'll figure that out. But if you are listening to us on Spotify and watching us on Spotify, and you are a longtime listener, you will know that the only way we're able to do this is actually through video because Abel is about a 3-hour flight away. So yeah, sorry, back to my original question. What made you actually want to move?
Uh, there were a few things. I think the biggest thing was really that I have a really good setup at work where I had the opportunity to do so without any real like big ramifications professionally. The company that I work for, we have offices across the country, and so I had the opportunity to make the move and have like guaranteed income upon moving. I think that's one of the big reasons a lot of people don't move. Sometimes it's how do you find employment in a new city? So there was
Mhm.
almost zero barrier to the move from like a technical, like financial, like life security situation. Um, and I had visited Montreal a few times. Actually, it's a funny callback because this was I don't remember what episode we were filming, but we recorded an episode of the podcast once, and my cousin phoned me in the middle of the recording,
Yeah.
and he pitched me on
Yeah.
going to Formula One. I don't know if anybody remembers this happening, and I said yes there, and that was my first time ever in Montreal, and I loved it. And then I visited a few more times for weddings, for travel, and man, yeah, like I think it's such a fantastic city, and I knew that I was going to really enjoy being here. So yeah, if I had the opportunity and I wanted to try it out, and I had been in Winnipeg for I guess 14 years since we moved here from Kenya, so it felt like it was a good time to kind of try something different. So yeah, I mean, a nice confluence of opportunity and just desire. So yeah, I just pulled the trigger, and honestly, I think it was a fantastic decision. I really have enjoyed my time here.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet. What you know, like why now? Like why did you choose to do it at this particular time in your
hmm
life?
Because I think this is one of those decisions where the fewer complications and responsibilities you have, the easier it is to make. I
Mm,
was looking at like the next 5 to 6 years of my life, and I was like, okay, there's going to be a lot of big things that happen. Like this, I'm at that place now where we're expecting some of those bigger things, like purchasing a house, like marriage, like kids, like all those things within the next like not very long time. Like not next year, but not 10 years. Like there's definitely like a shortening window between which I can actually make this kind of a decision, right? And
yeah.
so it felt like I don't want to say like my last chance, but it felt like a really good opportunity to kind of widen my experience, to live in a different city, to just learn about one of the coolest places that I've kind of traveled to a few times. And so I just seized the opportunity. It felt like it would be a bad decision not to, essentially. Like I was like, okay, if I don't do this, like how's that gonna feel? And it was like, okay, you just kind of feel dumb. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of what it came down to in the end, if I were to really simplify it. So
Yeah.
no, yeah, it's been fantastic, man. Like I really enjoyed it, and I definitely miss Winnipeg, and that's why I spent so much time there. um,
Yeah.
I'm there all the time. So yeah, it's definitely difficult to be away from like my mom and my brother and my sister-in-law and the baby and all my friends and everything. But luckily, I still can work there remotely. Luckily, there are direct flights now from Montreal to Winnipeg that are actually very reasonable price wise. So
Mhm.
I can still maintain connection. So yeah, that's a big thing on my side, I think. And it's going to come up more and more and more. But I think we should hit the ball back into your side of the court because you have had some big updates as well. What's been going on your side, Aaron? How have you spent the last, I don't know, 20 months or so?
20 months. Yeah, I mean, it's been good. The funny thing is, like, whenever it's like the day to day seems like so different and such big things are happening and everything seems, such in contrast to call it whatever a year ago or a month ago or things like that. But it's funny because like outside of a few big life events, most things are basically just like a slightly upgraded level to what they were before, you know? Like, I mean, I'm still working kind of at the same job, I still work as a financial advisor running, a financial planning practice, but now it's just gotten, slightly more complex, bigger because bigger projects are going on and every like than my I guess whatever I guess my 27-year-old self. That was the last time recorded, I was
Mm,
27.
mm.
And it's like, it's kind of one of those things where, you know, not much has changed on that front, right? I guess you could change jobs and stuff, so that would, kind of be worth saying, but it's basically like I have the exact same job, things are just bigger, you know? Um and similar, like when it comes to my relationships, my partner, my closest relationship, I'm in the exact same relationship, but things have just gotten kind of bigger, right? Like a little bit more elevated. Like I am now currently engaged to be married,
Let's
which
go.
is exciting. But like I feel like the day to day and my perspectives of the relationships is very similar than what it was kind of when I was 27. But now I just have, invoices and deposits to put down for wedding venues and things like that. Right. I feel like my relationships with like a lot of my friends are basically the exact same, but like they've leveled up because, maybe I've gotten much closer with people who were acquaintances back then, or I've gotten kind of on a deeper level with people who are close friends back then. Right. So I feel like, you know, a lot of things like post graduation, which was, early 20s, and then after, call it my, escapade around the world or around Europe, which was like mid 20s, to now has kind of just blended into the same. So I would say that, overall life is obviously pretty good, and better than my 20-year-old would have expected it to be. But yeah, I don't know. Does that
That's
give you
amazing.
perspective?
I think so. Yeah, I think I mean, obviously, I know more details, and so like I can say they're not small upgrades. Like these are big upgrades, and like
Yeah.
it's been really
Of
exciting to
course.
see. I
Yes.
feel like.
I'm not diminishing, obviously, that, oh God, that now that I'm going to be married, like within a year, like, no, I'm definitely not diminishing that. Jesus Christ. I'm not diminishing.
Of
I
course, no,
just
no,
would
no, no,
like
no.
to make it
I just wanted
known.
to clarify. I just wanted to make it clear, like
Yeah.
these are not
No.
small things we're talking about. Like these are very exciting, like big jumps, and it's been amazing to just like spectate and just see everything happening. So,
Yeah.
yeah, kudos to you, man. Amazing job the last couple of years. It's been a fun ride, I bet, and more to come. Like, I am going to be
Yeah.
involved somewhat in the wedding, and we'll chat about that at some
Yes.
point, I'm sure. So,
Yeah.
that's going to be so much fun. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? We could just say it now. Guy, big news. Okay. For anyone here. That's probably, outside of, the fact that I'm getting married, one of the most exciting things about the wedding is the fact that Abel is actually going to be officiating my wedding
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm so excited.
with my partner Sophie. We've mentioned her on the we've mentioned her
It's
on
been
the
official. I am the
there it
official
is,
officiant. They even
Abel
gave me a flask.
officiant. Yeah, so I mean, that's obviously very exciting. Abel was an instrumental part of when I met my partner, and he will be an instrumental part of becoming one with my partner. So that's pretty
Yeah,
exciting. That's probably
it's gonna be a
big.
ton of
That's
fun. I'm
probably
so
some big
excited.
news in
Mhm.
terms of the podcast itself. But I think like over the course of the first season through our recordings, there was we went through about 2 calendar years probably of recording, and at the end of the year we had mentioned this before, how we have these themes, right? Like themes of the upcoming year, and like goal setting, not necessarily goal setting, like perspective setting, I would say, of the following
Mhm.
year. So next year, at the time of this recording, being 2024, it's December 2024. Probably this is going to be released, January of 2025. But next year is kind of like another, you know, opportunity to like start fresh and move into a new perspective or new stage or whatever it is that you may want, right? And a big piece of next year over the course of the last few weeks, as Abel and I have been talking, a big piece is going to be this podcast. And I think it's important to take some time to illustrate and explain why, and how does that relate to this kind of like change and time of year for you think?
So sorry, just to kind of distill that down a little bit, you're asking why it's important that we're getting back into this podcast, especially today, like right now.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
That was probably a more simpler way
I
of
don't know.
explaining it.
We needed the full idea to then zoom
Yeah.
in. We needed both of them.
Yeah.
um, oof, so many reasons. I have notes. I have many notes here, and I don't know exactly like where to start, where to go. I think because I can see that. My goodness, we have a lot of things to talk about today. I will try to blast through this as quickly as possible. Essentially, the big things on my side are, first of all, that I still really enjoy doing this. I think that when we initially spoke about this, when you were in your escapades in Europe, it really was about the fact that like we felt like whenever we talked to one another, there was a bit of like excitement that came from it. Like I always
Hmm.
felt like I felt more motivated. I felt like I was challenged. I felt like we spoke about things that were interesting and things that whenever I spoke to other people about them, they found them interesting as well. So I think that's a huge part of it. I think that when I think back to the reason why we initially had wanted to do this, those reasons are still valid to me today. Like I think all of that still
Hmm.
applies, and so that was one of the big things that I was like, this makes sense. There's also the fact that um, I think the bigger, not the bigger, but like another piece that is a bit interesting is, and one of the reasons why we've kind of tried to upgrade as much as possible is that I felt like there was a bit of meat on the table, and I think you might share this perspective that we were doing very much like a garage, like janky setup with our
Yeah.
last attempt at this. Like um, we had cardboard boxes. We were in
I
your
wish so
kitchen.
badly we took a picture.
We
Like
should have.
maybe we did somewhere in the archives.
Yeah, we might
But
have to
that
look
was
into it to
V1.
share.
Like that was how we started.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think there was a bit of a feeling, and a lot of this is coming from you. Like you were motivating this recently, but I think I fully agree with your perspective. Is that there's a way in which we didn't fully level up to like what we really wanted to do, just by the
To see if this
limitations of
was
like
legit.
exactly, yeah, by the limitations of like what we had available, of the knowledge we had, of like the constraints of the time. And so now that schedules have opened up a little bit, now that we have, I guess, a bigger scope on this thing, now that you've been doing video production for a couple of years on like your various projects, like you've done some of this on the side, and so like you have, I would say, I don't know, would you consider yourself semi-pro kind of knowledge of video production or pro level? Somewhere between
I
there is what
have
I would bet.
I've spent far too long watching YouTube videos on video production.
There you go.
That's about it.
Yeah,
But one
we're gonna
thing
leverage that.
yeah, like I mean, in terms of like my favorite podcasts that I've listened to, right? They all have like video as an aspect of it, right? So
Hmm.
that's quietly as simply put is like, okay, if we are going to test the waters to see if there's validity behind what we're doing here, we might as well add this component that, it's almost just like a new baseline when it comes to podcasting, in my opinion.
Hmm. Very much so. Yeah, yeah. So I think those are the two big things. Like I still believe in the reasons we were interested in this in the first place, and then also yeah, I think that it's motivating to try new things and to kind of like see how far we can take it. So that's a quick summary of my side of these things. What about you? What are you thinking? Like, how was your approach to this? The same or different from last time? What's on your mind?
Yeah. I would say I probably have like three reasons that are, not necessarily exclusive of yours, but
Mhm.
I don't know. Do you know the book The Second Mountain? Have you heard of the book The Second Mountain by David Brooks?
I have not. No.
Yeah, so basically it's this book where, he talks about like there's these two mountains in life, right? And then the first mountain is about like, the aesthetics of life, and then the second mountain is kind of like about the feelings of life, right? So the first mountain is about things like, freedom, success, and then riches, and then you climb it, and then kind of one of three things happen. It's like number one, you get to the top and you've realized that it's not as fulfilling as you kind of thought it would be. Number two is like you get knocked off, like a major life event happens, like whatever, God forbid, like an accident or like a death or an illness in your life happens, and then you get knocked off, and then you end up in like this valley. He calls it the valley of despair. And then in that valley, there is kind of this second mountain that you see, where this second mountain is really all about like commitment, investment, and really going deep on like these meaningful things, community, relationships, and causes, faith maybe in your life that allows you to truly feel life rather than like look at it, which is kind of
Mhm.
what the first mountain was, right? So I feel like, you know, if we're to look at it like first mountain, which dominated quite a bit, I would say, of my 20s, being like pleasure, or, trying to like find and, find like the aesthetic version of success and working towards that. And then kind of like this second mountain that is more so around like lasting joy and like peace and, meaning. I feel like this podcast, in my eyes, is almost just the way I see it is it's kind of like an expression of my attempt to climb the second mountain. Almost having this like weekly perspective and reminder that going deep on certain aspects of life can enhance your experience of life, right? So that's I was thinking about like, why, and that book, I just got reminded of that book. I feel like parts of me, maybe lots of parts of me, is still kind of like, you know, on the first mountain in some regard. Like, I know that let's say I haven't achieved a lot of the things that I particularly want to achieve, but I would say that my continual pursuit of it, I would rather have it more kind of deep and meaningful rather than kind of aesthetics. My goal for this podcast is to have that as a pretty good representation of it. Um, Also, the second thing is, man, the number of times I've tried to like create content and get into a habit of like creating content, whether it's like YouTube channel, Instagram, TikTok, writing blogs, it's like the number of times I've tried to do it and just failed. I'm probably at like 7 or 8 times now, right? Where I've started to do it and like I've failed at it. And out of every single time, this is like by far single handedly been the most enjoyable of those times. Like, I feel like what out of all the other times I've kind of tried to do this endeavor, it has always been like such a heavy lift to like script something, like, whatever, video, edit, everything like that. Whereas our conversations that we've had in the past on the podcast has been definitely like my most enjoyable thing. Like, I look forward to it every week rather than
Mhm.
something that I check off. So that's like probably a big reason. And then um that I probably relates to my third reason being, I feel like one of the reasons why a lot of the other times I've tried to do this before and it not work out, or I kind of just quit, or, frankly just lost interest, was simply just because I don't really feel as if I need to be an expert here. Right. And I feel like in all these other kind of pursuits I've done in this sphere of like, call it being a creator or whatever that means, it's like I felt the need to be like teaching something, right?
Mhm.
And like being a teacher as opposed to a student. And like, rather than feeling like your content needs to be like perfect and complete, this has been something where I've just, it's been really nice to like kind of put something out there that's unfinished and like imperfect. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's very interesting when you can share your process towards a particular pursuit, and like other people who can connect and resonate, they can join on for the ride. So probably three big reasons.
That last one really resonates with something that I had down. So, um, that whole idea of not having to be an expert, of being able to basically share what you're thinking. I was reading this book. It's called Descend into Meaning. It's
Mhm.
by I forget his name, but he has a YouTube channel, and so I know him from the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is called The Nerd Writer, and on the Nerd Writer,
Okay.
he basically does video essays, and they're quite good. So the video essays are quite good, and he essentially condensed a few of them into a book. And one of the books, he quotes Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was I don't know if he was a writer or a poet or a mix of the two. Like he basically was a really great thinker and a really great writer. And he says something along the lines of, he then learns that in going down into the secrets of his own mind, he has descended into the secrets of all minds. And it's like, there's a way in which, even if we're not right, I think just sharing things sometimes can connect people, because so often what I am worried about that I never speak about, other people are worrying about and they never speak about it either. And so I think when we come back to like what used to be our old tagline, having conversations or speaking about things that we think should be spoken about,
Yeah.
I think that really ties into that as well, where we're going to be wrong, we're going to be vulnerable, we're going to be cringy. It's definitely going to happen. But I think the big picture is that hopefully we can kind of still speak to somebody. And I think that's at least worth the attempt.
Yeah. I think there's something special about being intentional about things, which, that's what, whatever, David Brooks talks about, right? Is when you're intentional about things, especially if it's something that's imperfect, I think there's something that really resonates with people. I feel like a lot of the stuff that I follow, like the people who I follow or even look up to, it's like they're people who are like maybe minimum like half a step ahead of me, and then maximum like 3 steps ahead of me in any particular domain. And as I learn, they continue to learn as well. And it's just like this cascading thing that's been pretty valuable. So I guess like in terms of looking at the intentionality for this podcast, probably it would be broken down into, in my opinion, I guess 2 things. Number 1, being intentional about, the quality, right? Because now we are taking a step up towards, utilizing tools like video or social media and things like that. So being a little bit more intentional about the quality and putting this out way more out than it was before. And then 2 is being a little bit more intentional about the specificity. So like the domains that we want to explore, kind of moving into whatever season 2 and beyond and things like that. And I think like when we look at what we can explore, I think a good place to start is like what we have experienced and what we have explored. So now being whatever my final year of being 29, the probably in my perspective, a good place to start is like looking back at, our 20s. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's the final lap. You gotta, on the final lap, you take a look back, you enjoy the views.
Yeah. If you were to think about what is something that stood out in your 20s that you believe is valuable enough for us to go deep on in the podcast, what would you say would be one of those things?
Oof. Uh, it's a big question, and it's so big that it's really what the podcast is about, right? Like, so this will be a continuous thing that we kind of keep coming back to. Is
Yeah.
what are the big things? I think if we talk about specifically like what some of the pillars are, I think one of the big ones would really be how to. It's like the navigation from the student life, there's a bit of a psychological shift. I think psychology is so important in that realm, because
Right.
like the difference between being a student, being in the professional realm is just kind of wild, and a lot of people don't get prepared for that. So I think switching the psychology from I'm a student to I'm a professional in a workplace, to like from I have an exam in 6 months to like this is the rest of my life. Like it's really wide open. I think there's a significant switch there that happens in the early 20s, like out of university, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean that was for sure a perspective that I thought of too. Like, man, doesn't it feel like it was just all like a blur? Like I still distinctively remember being in university, even like whatever in our final year in university.
Mhm.
I still remember like pretty specific aspects of that, even just that 1 year. But like the blend of like the last 6 years since we've graduated, it's like I could not tell you the different what happened in each specific year.
No, no. It is so much more memorable back then.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a huge reason is because of those psychological shifts that you have to make are almost like y- it's like you're on defense mode almost.
Yep.
I don't want to say it's like trauma, but
It's
it's
a little,
like a
it's a little
big shift. It's a big shift that you're
bit.
kind of forced into it, and then all of a sudden it's like you have to file your taxes every year,
Yep.
and
Yep.
um, God knows how to do that. Have you filed your taxes?
In December?
No, like over the course of the last 6 years.
Yes, I have been filing my
Okay,
taxes.
good,
Yes.
good. Just
I was like, wait, did
just
something
checking.
change? am I am I in trouble?
Yeah, we have. Yeah,
Yes, no, I have filed my taxes. Yes, yes. Have you?
yep.
Once or twice, I hope. But yeah, sorry. I'll kick it back to you. Like, what are you thinking? Like, what are some of those big things on your mind about? Because I feel like as much as I only have a year behind you, I feel like 30 is still a bit far away from me. Like, just psychologically, it feels like
No way.
a bigger gap. It's not far. It's not far away, but like
Nothing's gonna
it's a bit of a
happen.
gap.
Nothing's gonna happen next year for it to be memorable enough for you to think that you still have a way.
No, no, no,
You
no.
still have a
100%.
ways to.
100%. But what I'm saying is like I feel like this is your victory lap, you know? Like I'll have my victory lap next year. We'll have this conversation again in December of
Yeah.
2025. And then I can give my my deepest, darkest secrets. So I think you take the wheel. Like, what are you thinking? What do you want to talk about the nice little bit? What has your 20s highlights, whatever you want? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I would say specifically, if there's one thing that I would say I probably remember that stands out in this post graduation kind of like portion of my life to now, for sure, my relationships,
yeah.
right? Like whether it's the platonic, the romantic, the ones that ended, the ones that began, like
Mm-hmm.
so much I would say of my fundamental experience of the world over the course of the last half a decade has been influenced by the different relationships at different points. And
Mm-hmm.
man, it's actually mind-blowing. It's like probably if I were to think about anything that I get excited to talk about more on this podcast would be the few things that have shaped how I look at the world in
Mm-hmm.
the lens of my fundamental human experience. So for sure, I would say relationships have been a huge thing in my 20s. And I feel like that's a big thing for a lot of people, because it's the first time in your life, I would say post graduation, where you're like forced to it's like one of two things could happen, right? You take the initiative and you like figure your way out through the relationships, or you kind of just, you know, it's kind of sad, but you might end up lonely. Because in school, those were forced relationships, like you had to be around them. But
Would you say anything about your relationship with yourself? Because I feel like that's also changed quite significantly for myself in my 20s. Has that been an aspect that you've felt has remained fairly stable, or
I would say that the internal scripts have just decreased volume.
okay, you're gonna have to break that down for me?
Yeah. I'm going to have to think about that too. I
I
feel
like how
like
it sounds. I think I know what you mean, but just dig in a little bit. Let's go.
my relationship with myself has two perspectives. Number one is the default state, like my default relationship with myself. And number two would be like my trained relationship with myself. And I think that in my 20s, the impact of my default relationship with myself has lessened and in replacement of the trained relationship with myself. I feel like my relationship with myself has just changed from the perspective of like I'm like putting in more work on the relationship rather than just letting the default relationship with myself live out it to fruition.
And safe to say that the default relationship with yourself is perhaps not the healthiest and the trained one is a bit more wholesome. And is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that I would say so, right? Like, I mean, I guess, you know, you only train for a marathon because you can't run a marathon. I would say if you were to think about it, you'd put like two characters on my shoulder, one being my default relationship and one being my trained relationship. My default relationship would have like the devil horn ears, and then my trained relationship would have a like, you know, a halo.
The halo. Hmm.
And I would say that over the course of my life, my goal is to slowly over time transition my default relationship to actually look more like my trained relationship. And I would say in my 20s is the first time I realized that that was a pursuit, you know, that needed to be undertaken, is change my relationship with myself.
I like that. I like that. That's big. And I think a lot of people resonate with that.
Yeah, I think prior to that, there's no space. Like you don't have I think we don't have the emotional capacity in like definitely not in high school, but not even in university. I don't think we have the emotional and internal thought capacity to a recognize that our default relationship with ourselves is not something that's ideal, and two, oh, we have the ability to actually create this alternative relationship with ourselves that over time we can actually change, we could use to influence our current relationship,
Mhm.
you know. So I would say my relationship with myself has definitely, it's just shifted weight.
Love that. Love that for you.
Yeah. What would you say is something that, you know, you kind of you kind of wish you put more effort into
Oof.
in like, call it, in this postmodern world, postgraduate modern world?
Honestly, I think one of my big I try not to have regrets in general. I think regrets are a bit useless. Like they insist upon themselves and they add nothing to the conversation. So I don't know if it's a regret or as much as it's if I had been more knowledgeable and intentional about money when I was in university and the couple years afterwards, um, I think I think things would have gone quite well. Like that's one thing that I really started to emphasize only like in my mid 20s, because I was a bit of a later graduate, and like by the time I went to Australia for a while and I came back. So like, I guess I only really got serious about money in the pandemic actually, because that's when I got back from Australia. And by then, I'm 23, 22 years old, and it takes a while to go from trying something for the first time to really understanding it and then to really like leveraging it and getting up to a higher level. So I think I didn't fully understand money. I was terrified of debt when I was in university, which is why I never even did student loans. So like I worked my way through university, and like looking back, if I had done a couple of student loans, like I would have been fine. I could repay them easily afterwards, and I could have even swung an exchange trip or something like that. Just because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to finance it and also pay for school fees and everything else at the same time. So like if I had really had a better grasp on just how many different avenues one can have for things like paying school fees and scholarships and all those kinds of things, for savings and investing. And I think someone told me about crypto in like 2018. Like Bitcoin was like, I was like when it was nothing. I'm like,
Yeah.
if I had put in $100 back then, who knows where it could be right now? Which is a bit of a silly one. I don't care too much about that one. But yeah, no, it's just I think I didn't have enough meaningful, in-depth conversations about money because it felt a bit taboo. It felt a bit like shameful sometimes to be like, oh, I don't have that much money right now because I just paid for like these textbooks. Like it just felt like a thing you don't talk about in university.
Yeah.
And I think there were some lagging impacts of that by the time that I could really like just sit down and really do like a good review of my financial position. So yeah, I think that's one where I it's obviously like one of the biggest focuses. Like money is a lever to so many things, so many experiences in life, so many positive situations. So I think that that's one that I really feel quite strongly about at this point. And I mean, I'm talking to you, so I imagine you might say the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that. I mean, it's interesting that you say that because obviously, that has a special place in my heart because, that's what I chose to do for my career. I pivoted from just, pretty generic business job to basically doing a job that is so solely focused on this idea of money. And it's been so eye-opening, really. Selfishly, one of the only reasons why I went into this was because I just wanted to know for myself, and now I look back and I'm like, just the access to the knowledge that I've been able to have access to and the experiences I've been able to have over the course of the past 6 years now doing this, just being able to give that to the people that I care about and potential future kids and everything like that, because I never had that growing up. But I would say that if I were to boil it down to like three things that I learned about money over the course of my 20s, that was kind of a shock, not necessarily like a shock, but it was eye opening. But number one, I've 100% like agree with you that we do not talk about it enough. Just people do not talk about money enough. And I have like no idea the exact reason why. Like you said, there's probably some, I could probably hypothesize like why. Maybe it's like a combination of like our the scripts in society that's been painted over us or like other, what our parents generation, their views on money and things like that. But it blows me away, like money is a fundamental part of the human experience, just like relationships. Yet it's so easy for us to talk about relationships, like we get a thrill about talking about gossip or gossiping about people and relationships or drama and things like that. But
Mhm.
like it feels weird to ask someone what the starting offer was or what the starting salary is on the offer that they got from their job.
Mhm.
It feels weird to ask about that. Whereas like I just never got it. Well, I guess it's not weird for me to ask that to people now because I'm like I literally do that for a living. So,
Yep, yep,
but
yep.
it's still like, I a part of me definitely in conversations, maybe I'm a little bit forward, but so many of the times like I'm like, when people perfect examples when people are transitioning jobs or whatever, and I'm like, it's probably if not the first, maybe one of the first three questions I ask is like, oh, so how much are they paying you? And I always just see like this split second like hesitation.
Yep, yep.
Not because the person who I'm talking to doesn't want to tell me, but the person who I'm talking to is like, oh shit, I did not expect that.
Mhm,
Right.
mhm.
So number
Probably no
one,
one else has asked that
probably,
question.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
probably the first one,
exactly.
yeah.
It's like one of those things where like everyone's thinking about it, but no one wants to ask
Yep.
it,
Yep, yep,
right?
yep.
Because we're just as nosy about money as we are about relationships or drama, but
Yep.
that's like a line that we've just in our heads just drawn. Oh, you don't cross that line, right? Which
Mhm,
is
mhm.
ridiculous. But anyways, people don't talk about it enough. Second thing is I feel like maybe this is just biased towards the education that you and I had, but it feels like there's this blanket of pressure that you need to figure out how you are going to like generate personal economic value or generate you know your path towards some sort of financial freedom like right away, right after you graduate, right? I feel like there's this blanket and pressure, and if you couple that with social media and our access to seeing, the outer words of like the outer like view of someone's, financial life on a day to day, that or that you don't know, it doesn't really matter. It
Mhm.
feels like this burden, and it feels as if you're not like no matter where you're at, you're not enough. Like it's not enough. Like no matter where you're at, it's like um, you're not there yet, whatever your expectation is. So I would say that the need, like this pressure to have it all figured out, not like to become rich, but to figure out how you're going to get rich in
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
20s is like
Yeah.
a thing that constantly comes up.
Like just having the answer ready.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like if you got a job at whatever insert random company, like the perspective is like, oh, you're just going to stay there for the rest of your
Hmm.
life, work your
Hmm.
way up, and then eventually be the CEO of that company. That's like your path towards financial galore. Um, and then probably lastly, uh, like the perspective that there's a direct string that connects how you either spend money or how you don't spend money. There's a direct string that connects that to who you are as an individual. I think that there's like you can learn a lot about someone like from how they view and act with or around money. I think there's it's an incredible like psychological lens that obviously I don't know all about yet, but I'm learning more and more about, someone's how someone views views their life, or views life in general through how they act or spend or not spend or think about money.
Could you give an example?
Um, Yeah. Yeah, I would say like a perfect example would be like the avoidance to spend money even when like you have significantly more than you are contemplating spending or
Hmm.
needing for any aspect of your life, right? And I'm kind of speaking to like myself here.
I was going to say.
Yeah. It's like the just like the it's like the inability to spend money or like the discomfort internally
Hmm.
that you
Yeah.
experience when you spend money, your default state. It's very eye-opening to potential insecurities or discomfort that you may have when spending money, like insecurities or anxiety that you have. And then that fundamentally, because money is such a, it's such a lens into our lives, that also probably you could learn a lot about how that person views other things too,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Whether it's like over analyzing relationships or overthinking about relationships or having anxiety around that, um, you know, having anxiety or like over analyzing health, your personal health or things like that. I think um, money is it's very easy. Like if the more and more you like spend time talking about it or thinking about it, I feel like it's a pretty good lens on the way that someone views the world. Does that make sense? Does that example make sense?
Yes. Yep. 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 It's interesting, and yeah, like you said, like we just don't talk about this stuff enough, and we really should. We really should. Like, what's that? Because I think we've spoken about this in the past, and you've said that you want to make mandatory in high school. Was it wellness? No, was it psychological? No, was that you? Like, I don't know. It must have been a podcast or something. I assumed it was you. But essentially, I think someone was saying that if they had the keys to the educational system, they would make what is it's like it's not wellness. It is mindfulness or something along those lines. Like something along the lines of like psychology, like
Yeah.
mental health, some mental health something would be mandatory in high school. They would make some sort of computer science or statistics course mandatory instead of
Yeah.
Pythagoras, and then also like money management, because even as a business grad, and I think I did like 4 finance courses because I just did some
Hmm.
extra ones. Um, Financial planning was never one of the things that we covered, which is a bit crazy, and it's something that everybody needs to do. So no, it's definitely there's a big gap there between the supply and demand, I think, of this type of conversation, this type of knowledge, and yeah, that's where you come in.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's the only reason I have a job is because people don't know anything about money.
Yeah.
Yeah. um, Yeah.
Me too, by extension, because I also work in financial services. So the base of my income does come from the same kind of situation. It's just a few different layers to get to like my little corner of the organization.
Yeah. Um, Switching gears, how's the relationship front? Like, I'm getting married.
You are getting
How's
married.
yeah,
Yes,
how's
yes.
how's yours?
Nothing. I wouldn't. There are basically no updates at this point. I am.
You're still a free agent. Ladies.
You know what, that is a way to phrase it. Yes, I'm still a free agent. Definitely in a place where now like I'm open to contemplating one. Um, Not in a rush. Definitely one of those things where I'm like, okay, I probably should at some point soon. So I'm not. I'm definitely not anti-relation. I think there was a good chunk of this year. I think Q1 and Q2 where I wasn't even really considering it. I was just not in a place where I wanted to be or I could facilitate a relationship. But definitely, yeah, like now, like if I were to find someone that I was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense, like, yeah, be very open to it at this point. So watch this space, I would say. Watch this space.
Yeah. Interesting. So
That's where that.
if you were to look at that, call it this quadrant of your pie, I think we've talked about the slices of the pie before, right?
Oh yeah.
It's like
Oh yeah.
relationship, physical health, financial health, and mental health.
Mhm.
Yeah. So if you were to
It's your
think
pie. I don't
about
know. You tell me.
yeah, it's
Okay.
those four things, right?
Okay. Perfect. Okay.
And oh yeah, it was a pumpkin pie, right?
It
Do
was.
you remember?
Yes.
I was telling you it
Yes.
was a
Yes.
pumpkin pie because the
Mhm.
filling all looks the exact same, and you only have so much filling, and you could fill all the different slices of the pie. I think I just kissed the mic as well. But
So busy.
anyways,
Mhm.
but yeah. So if you were to look at your relationship slice, that quadrant of the
Mhm.
pie, if as of right now you're a free agent, so less of that slice is dedicated to like a romantic relationship.
Mhm.
My question is, would so how is that pie, like how are you filling it up? If there's very little in the space of like the romantic relationship,
Mhm.
how is that slice divided up right now for you?
So you're
And
asking like,
sorry.
okay.
And follow up question is, how has that changed over the course of your 20s?
Ooh, that's interesting. Okay, so I guess if we rewind to the beginning of my 20s, I did enter my 20s in a relationship, or did I just start it then? Anyway, I was in that 3.5, 4 year
Mm,
relationship, somewhere along those lines.
right.
Um, After that, I was in another one that was about 6 months, but was really like a year and a half. But we
Yeah.
can get into that at a different time. So I guess I have spent most of my 20s in a relationship or recently exiting a relationship or in the awkward in betweens. And so I think this year especially, like the reason why I said like in Q1 and Q2, I really wasn't looking for that much. That was very much an adjustment period for me after the move. I think I had. It's hard to say I underestimated it. It's hard to underestimate something you've never done before. But I had underestimated just the challenge of the move, of getting comfortable in a completely new province. And I had some network here, but very different from in Winnipeg, right? Like in Winnipeg, I really have like my friends that I've had for like 15 years. My families are like, I am good. I have 1,000 couches to sleep on in Winnipeg if I need to. It was very different here. Like it's this, you could like, I have some fantastic friends here as well. Like my people here are amazing too, but it's a very different type of support. And it's a very different type of environment where I always have access to people in Winnipeg. And here it was very much like, because it's a much smaller network, because it's a network that I'm not that much accustomed to, there was just less available for me. If, for example, I was bored on a Thursday night, in Winnipeg, I'll find something to do in 5 minutes. Like it's the easiest thing to do to really like if I need that connection. And I realized that there was a bit of stunting, because I I took very little time by myself when I was in Winnipeg. I really did not have much, um, just sit down and be by yourself time. I was often working, and if I wasn't working, I was either like at the gym or playing basketball, or just like there was always people around. And so what I realized when I first moved here was like, oh, it's just me. Like you spend a few weekends and it's just like you by yourself at home, and it's like, oh wow, like there's some stuff to work on. So yeah, so I think I really poured into myself this year. I think I really spent a lot of time just thinking and exploring things and re-exploring things that I used to enjoy. Kind of like spending more time discovering myself. Like I think self-discovery was kind of the theme of this year. And it was fantastic because I think that by the end of like Q2 was when a bunch of people started coming to visit. Like in June, July was when I got the biggest influx of people coming in. And really by that time, like I was feeling in a good place. Like I had kind of worked on some stuff. I was excited to see everyone and I was comfortable. And so yeah, so I think I spent that part of the pie this year very much in kind of understanding my place in the city, understanding my place in myself. I think I've really found some things out about myself. Some of them were not great. That's the thing about introspection, man. Like you see sometimes you see some things and you're like, damn, like I need to do better on this, and you need to give yourself grace at the same time. So yeah, that's really what it's been about the last few months. Um where that allocation is going to go in the next few months, like I couldn't tell you honestly. Like I have a pretty okay routine right now that I'm happy to continue with, but definitely like if I were to explore a relationship, it would be something that would be like very serious at this point. Like um I am at that place now where like no one is being dated for fun. Like we're dating because there's like we can see that this might actually like be something like very serious. So yeah, I'm actually quite excited. I wouldn't say that I'm like, oh, let's go right now into a relationship, but like I feel like something is like, yeah, I feel like something's coming. I can feel in the air. I can feel it coming. So yeah, once that comes, it's gonna be fantastic. Yeah,
I can feel it coming in the air tonight.
exactly. Exact
Yeah,
classic. Yeah, yeah. Well, no, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at
that's
right now.
sweet.
Hmm.
That's sick, man. That's sick. I am also very happy and excited. I was actually very much looking forward to seeing kind of how a lot of things would change for you in this area of your life when you moved, cuz
Hmm.
cuz you're obviously, you're an extroverted guy, and you have an insane number of like, friends and social connections. You're close to your family and things like that, and it's like, I wondered what things would look like if you take the Abel out of that and see if you can take that out of the Abel. But, um, I guess you already had a little bit of a circle there in Montreal, and
Yeah.
people are always coming to visit you too. So,
Honestly, I had a similar thought when I first moved here. I was like, you know what, I want to be a different man because a different city, different city, different man. But no, it's still me.
yeah,
It's still me. So like, yeah, I think I've definitely grown. But yeah, like I think a lot of those tendencies that kind of got me to where I was in Winnipeg, like they're still there for better or worse. And yeah, just I guess it's part of pruning and keeping what you want. So it's been, it's definitely been fantastic. I've really enjoyed it. So yeah, more to come in this space.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's relationships
Hmm.
for you. Like
Hmm.
it's always ebb and flow. It's always changing, just like money. Your perspective on it's always going to change. So when we first started this, I mean, if you were to listen to our season 1 episodes, our intro is literally a podcast that explores the human condition. The number of times I've been asked what the hell the human condition is by, a couple people who listen, it's actually more than you'd think, really. And I for some reason I always have a different answer.
Right.
So I was going to ask you, if we continue to take the human condition into the future of this podcast, how do you define it?
Like that is the question, isn't it? For me, I think about it's like the theory of economics a little bit, which really centers around we have unlimited wants, but we have limited resources to fulfill them with. And so this idea that we actually just spoke about, like something like, how do you allocate your time and your energy and your resources to these various desires, I think is kind of quite central. But then also, there's a whole point of you actually pick your desires, right? So I think for me, it's this mix between how do you live a life where you choose the right things to want, and then you're able to then deliver on those things, on those desires, right? So it's like, first of all, you pick what you want, and then you give yourself what you want. And I think once you add in, you know, once you add in things like fallacies and biases, once you add in things like societal pressures and the realities of, being limited based on where you live and where you're born and all those other things, then I think that kind of all pyramids up to being the human condition. So yeah, I think for me, it's this mix between desire, between choice, and just the limitations of resources. Or maybe limitation is maybe perhaps like a word that has connotations, but I really just mean the fact that you can't have everything, right? You can't have every single thing, and so you need to be quite intentional about selecting what you kind of drive towards. And so yeah, I think it's a long answer for a simple question, but that's roughly what my brain kind of rotates around. Does that
Yeah, that
how do,
sounds
how do
like
you
one
feel
of the
about that?
answers. That sounds like one of the answers that I give someone.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And I
and
bet
then
if you
another
ask me next week,
answer was completely different. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Have you landed on anything that's a bit more concise that you're like, this
Yeah.
is one I can give consistently?
I mean, honestly, I just wrote down, the characteristics that are fundamental to our existence that set us apart from all other species.
Say it again.
The characteristics that are
Mhm.
fundamental to our existence that set us apart from all other species. That is the human condition.
Tell me more. Keep going. I feel like I need some
Yeah.
definitions.
So I came across this Medium article. I'm actually going to pull this up. Um, yeah, it has a pretty it had a pretty good write up on it. This guy, the name of the article was "The Pursuit of Satisfaction: Understanding the Human Condition," and the start goes like this. What are we? A dog does not need to know if it's a dog. Plants don't need to know either. But we, human beings, are the only living beings on the planet that ask those questions. We are the only ones to suffer from existential crises. Man is the only being who is not happy with being what he is. Because it's what we are, dissatisfaction is a part of our DNA, and we are an unfinished project. So, actually, it goes on. There's a highlight that I made in this article that's actually pretty good.
Mhm.
Can the human being live in full peace and happiness with what he has? It is common to idealize that a certain achievement will bring us happiness. What we all want is very simple: good health, a happy family, a house we've idealized, a car we've dreamed of, and a job which we've studied hard and with which we feel fulfilled. We then have all the ingredients that allow us to live happily for the rest of our lives. However, that doesn't happen. Why? Now, basically, my definition of the human condition remains the same. The characteristics that are fundamental to our existence that set us apart from all other species. But I think like that's a little bit broad. So my perspective on what I am most interested about is kind of the internal experiences. Specifically, the one kind of mentioned in this article here is like, why are we not satisfied, right? And maybe there's a perspective of like evolutionary psychology that we can pull on, and like our ancestors, and you know what they gained from continual pursuit is definitely not the same as what we gain from continual pursuit, and but that same gene has kind of survived and transferred down through through our species. But a part of me is like, you know, y- the perspective, like, have you heard of the saying, like, authors write books for themselves? I think that is very relevant here from the domain of the human condition, especially in this like cool realm of satisfaction. I think, we've talked about this many times. One of the things that I've struggled with, probably, I would say more so since like I'd say for a good part of my life, but more so post university and post college, is this idea of understanding this aspect of like satisfaction, like reaching this level of satisfaction. And my perspective of the human condition, and basically what this article is saying, is that it's very little, like it's not very possible, right? Like you can't fully achieve it. And for me, it's like I just want to know why, and that can extend to different things, like whether it like in this kind of area, like emotional struggles, or existential crises or questions, and these moral and ethical challenges that we have to face, and things like that. So I don't know, I think the definition kind of remains the same, but my interest in it goes more specific to the internal state of not being satisfied, or not having, or being enough. And yeah, I think if there's one thing I could take away from this podcast, and it positively impacts my life, it would be understanding more around my human condition. And maybe other people will gain some value out of that. Does that make sense?
Makes a ton of sense. Yes.
Great. Sweet. So if you were to do the TLDR, oh, what's up?
Okay. This is not a pushback like significantly, but one thing that's been on my mind recently, and this is a complete tangent. I'm going to take 2 minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But essentially, I've been thinking a lot about how like humans' place on the planet and everything. And
Humans place, where
mm,
humans place?
yeah, humans' place on the planet. And
Oh.
I think I have humans on less of a pedestal than some people have. In fact, I don't have humans on a pedestal. I think humans are, you know, animals in nature that are part of this ecosystem. And when Mr. Arthur that you just quoted said, humans are the only animals that are unsatisfied, I'm like, that's a bit presumptuous, isn't it? Like, is there a way that we can actually know that? Like, have you chatted with, an amoeba? Like, I think we underestimate sometimes the complexity of the animal and plant and fungal kingdoms. I think there's interesting stuff happening there. Like I'm not arguing that like like a moss is sentient, but I think that there's some things that are just like we assume that we're the only ones, and it's like we can't know for sure. But I just think that's really interesting. I think it's really interesting how when you look at the facilities and the faculties that kind of create um, consciousness,
Hmm.
um, it's very hard to find a line. Like I think we can all agree that like dogs are conscious, but like where does that end? Like is it all animals or ants conscious? Are like sponges in the ocean, which are animals, conscious? It's just I think everything's a bit blurry, and I think that's interesting. So yeah, anyway, that just triggered that thought in my mind. But please take it away.
No, yeah, that's good. And I honestly, my perspective when I was reading this article, it wasn't on, oh, is he accurate on the fact that we're the
Mhm.
only being that is unhappy? It was more so like, okay, why?
Why? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Why are we? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I have very little, expertise in the domain of
No, no, yeah, no. This was a
other
complete segue. This had
conditions.
nothing to do. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of toss that in there because I think it's interesting.
No, yeah, good point. Good point. Okay, yeah, like I was saying, so if you were to give a TLDR of this episode, this first season 2 kickoff, hit me.
Oh man. Mm, well, number one, we're back. and better.
In
Number
4K,
two,
baby.
number two, we are kind of defining the swim lanes of the podcast a little bit more. And I think they'll primarily be these topics that we've just discussed. So I think we'll talk a ton about money, the psychology of money, the reality of money. I think we're going to talk a lot about um, the human condition in general, like all this kind of a fluffy idea, but we're going to try to pin down as much as possible. Like talk about how we're thinking about things, how it affects us, and then also we are going to really explore relationships, which will probably be the easiest one because we have a lot of like daily experience with that one. But it's also probably the most complex one in this equation. So that's my attempt for a TLDR.
Mhm.
What about you? What would you say?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you hit it right on the head. I have a hypothesis
Cool.
that there's going to be a lot of conversations that we have and topics that we explore that we think it's exclusive to this one domain, but it actually ties all three together. And that's a hypothesis, so we need to test it to make sure it's true. But I think that there's a lot of things that you and I are both curious about that actually, you know, has like interweaving webs in all three of these areas. And I'm excited to explore that, to be honest.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah. So you hit it right on the head. We are going to basically be intentional about this project where we get to explore our curiosity and share our learnings with anyone who decides to have us
Yeah.
penetrate their ears and I
Probably gonna
guess
be.
eyes too now.
Mhm. Yeah. That's a bit crazy. Like I feel quite concerned about the visual aspect of this. Like
What do you
I
mean?
no, no, just the fact that it's just so new. Like getting used to just my voice was hard enough. Now it's like my voice and like my
Your
picture on the screen.
face?
Like it's just yeah, it's a whole new level. So I hope we're not too offensive to the senses.
Well, I think you're great, man. I think you look great. Well, I,
Appreciate
I
it.
mean, I always thought you were great, but I think you
There you
also
go.
look great.
Appreciate it, sir. You too. I think we're doing
Thanks.
all
Yeah.
right. I think we'll be all right.
Yeah. And hey, when, like I said, this was forced out of necessity because we no longer live in the same city. However, when you're back,
Hmm.
we could maybe try to whip this up in person.
Yeah, old school.
Yeah.
Love it.
Um, cool. Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to listen. We appreciate it. And I guess, yeah. I guess our closing tradition, any interesting things from the week?
Ah, yes, yes. Actually, so this is very on topic. Have
Perfect.
you come across this Kenyan country singer? He's been making rounds on the social medias.
Kenyan country singer?
Yeah, like he
I
sings
like
in
you're not talking
Swahili.
like you're not talking about Shabuzi, right?
No, 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 not Shabuzi. I do not know where he's from.
Okay.
I will toss a link in the description. He has this song that's just like it's in Swahili. It's a Swahili gospel song, which just immediately it's like just a funny thing that it's also a country song. And he's been doing numbers. And so someone sent me this video yesterday, and like a bunch of people, you know how the TikToks and the Instagram Reels work these days, right? Like you can basically record yourself reacting to a song, and then just put the song in the background or something along those lines.
Oh yeah, like I guess so. Yeah, I've
Hmm.
seen I've seen that, but I didn't know it was that easy functionality. But I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So essentially, a lot of people are integrating the songs into the videos and then making some sort of joke about it. It's like, oh, like I'm listening to the funniest one for me was someone said I'm listening to Kenya Rogers, and I was like, yes, yes, that is Kenya Rogers. Um, but anyway, so really interesting. And then I wanted to hear the whole song because these are just like short clips. And so I go on YouTube, I type it up, and I see the video. And at the time of my seeing the video, it had only 90,000 views, like the official song video on YouTube had
Mm.
90,000 views. And then I go back to Instagram Reels, and the Instagram Reel I was looking at had like 130,000 comments. And there was another video that was sent to me, and that one had like 50,000 comments. Or sorry, that one had, I don't know, like it was in that scale. Like it was like insane numbers. Were those comments or views? Either
I
one
was
is too
just gonna
much.
say, yeah, the like to comment ratio doesn't seem right.
Because I think it would have been viewed over a million times, right? And so is
Oh,
30K comments a lot for a million views?
no, that's, I mean, I don't know, but
Mhm.
I think that's about right.
It was in those ballparks. It was essentially like it had either more views than the official video or more comments. I'm pretty sure it was comments, which means that the views were like insane, right? So like and it was just so interesting to me because nobody knows this guy's name, right? And
Oh,
this guy, he's some dude in Nairobi, and he's not making money off of this because the money is really coming from the YouTube, right? Like the AdSense from YouTube, and other people are taking his money because Instagram Reels, I don't think pays the song that's used on a creator's thing, and if they do, I'm sure it's pennies. I'm sure it's like absolutely nothing. Um, and it's just really interesting. Like I feel like these platforms have really done a good job of like separating artist from art. And by good job, I mean like sometimes it's actually quite unfortunate. Like, um, I mean, I guess it's a good thing that his song is blowing up, but I wonder how much he can actually leverage that to like, improve his situation where he is. Because those aren't his views. Like those are somebody else's views. Like, sure, the song will get a lot of like buzz, but like how many people like me are gonna like type in these two Swahili words into YouTube and like, try to get like I just it concerns me a little bit. And I find this happening more and more often these days where like someone will make something on one of these platforms and then it like becomes a meme and everybody else kind of like gets to reap the rewards because they do a better job monetizing it, but like the place it actually came from kind of doesn't get to play a part. Yeah, it's interesting, but yeah, that just I raised my eyebrow. I was like, is this something we should be concerned about? Like, because there is like a lack of connection these days. Like so often, even with Spotify, some of my favorite songs, I couldn't tell you what the name of the artist is because it just comes up on shuffle sometimes, So
yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting time I think for creators in the arts and stuff right now. So anyway, yeah, I was just I think I came across anyway.
Yeah, I think the distribution's almost as important, if not more important than the product,
Yeah,
right? So,
yeah,
I mean, chances are, if that artist didn't pop up on your shuffle, and if you had to look it up by artist, that that product probably would never get discovered
yeah,
nearly
yeah.
as much, right?
No,
So,
it definitely cuts both ways, 100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's cool. That's sweet.
Yourself? Anything from this week, last week,
This
the
week,
last 52 weeks?
yeah, yeah, no, I guess so. This week, an interesting thing. So, I've told you about how I have a Whoop strap,
Mm,
right?
hmm
Like the Whoop band.
Yeah, because
And
you
it's
you tried the
basically like
aura and the aura wasn't doing what you wanted it to do. It was a bit too
the Aura. I just hate having a ring
okay. There you go.
on. Like it was just very difficult.
Perfect. Okay,
It's
so you
actually going to be
switched.
quite difficult to get used to a ring once I'm actually married. Not going to
Yeah,
lie, like because a ring, it's just like even when you're in the gym, like
yeah,
holding on to like a bar, like squeezing a barbell or something, it just hurts. But nonetheless, yeah. So I switched over to the Whoop strap. I've had it since April, and it's been great. Right? I learned. I've been learning a lot of stuff, and then so also kind of in starting earlier this year, Sophie actually started going she kind of transitioned into like a travel nurse position, so she spends a lot of time like up north, like in the northern parts of the province, and doing contracts for like a week at a time type of thing. And the biggest benefit of the Whoop, I guess, is to like um, give you specific statistics about your daily recovery, right? Based on, multitude of factors like the day before, your sleep, your hydration and everything like that. Basically gives you like like a score of how hard you should push it in the gym or whatever that day. So And it also is an intense sleep tracker.
Mm.
Dude, when like I should be careful the way I say this. When Sophie is out of town and I'm sleeping, my sleep scores and recovery scores are are through the roof. Okay? But I physically don't feel a difference. Like it's not like whatever, it's not like she's like moving around a bunch in bed or anything like that. It's like I physically cannot tell the difference
Hmm.
because I don't really move much in bed. I just like kind of I just kind of lie there, and like
Hmm.
the way I go to sleep is the way I wake up. Like I'm just
Just,
yeah,
just a
like
vampire.
I close my eyes and the next moment it's I'm awake. It's morning. I
Hmm.
haven't moved.
Hmm.
I do go to the washroom a lot at night though.
You've mentioned,
I
yeah, the water thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Kitten bladder, I
But
think, was the
anyways,
phrase you used.
what?
Kitten bladder was the
Kitten
phrase that
bladder.
you used. Yeah.
Yes, yes, of course. But anyways, it's such a weird phenomenon that I don't feel any different,
Hmm.
but my sleep scores are like, dude, they're like 20 to 30% higher
Sorry. So when you
when I
say you don't
sleep
feel any
alone.
different, do you mean you don't feel different as you're sleeping, or even the next day after a great sleep score, you don't feel different? Like, do you feel like your sleep is
Oh,
more, it's deeper and
oh,
everything
yeah, yeah, yeah.
afterwards? Mm.
Yeah, good question. So in the morning when I wake up, I mentally assess before I look at my sleep score, I mentally assess how I slept. And I kid you not, when I mentally assess, there's no difference
Hmm.
between w- when I sleep alone versus when I don't.
That is interesting.
And there's actually research and data backed behind this where like it's funny when a woman has a mate in the same bed, their sleep scores rise. They when,
This is dangerous territory, Aaron.
when a main
Mate.
when a man or a male has reported sleep scores alone versus with
Mhm.
someone else in the bed, they've reported lower scores.
That's interesting. Why
Yeah.
do they have an hypothesis of why, or is it just one of those things that is still?
Yeah, yeah. I guess the hypothesis was like tr- back in our ancestral times, like the man was tasked with the primary role of like protecting. So like
Mm,
naturally their heart rate was higher when they had a flock of people they needed to protect. So
okay.
like I guess in modern time that means when Sophie is in the bed,
Mm,
I am my heart rate is on
yeah.
alert in
Caveman
case
Aaron
someone's
comes
going to
out.
break in. But yeah, that's an interesting thing that I realized.
Sick.
Yeah. I've communicated this to Sophie sometimes.
Mm.
It
And
didn't go over well.
I was wasn't received well. No.
No. No. And actually there was a solution for this is to have two separate blankets, two
Okay.
separate like two like we have a queen bed, two queen size blankets so that when one person moves, it's way less likely to
Okay.
impact the other person because
So
you're
you
not
just like
sharing a blanket.
you tuck it around yourself or what?
Yeah. She also didn't she was not a fan of that one
No.
either.
Yeah, I could have told you that for free. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Okay, interesting. That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Cool. Anyways, okay, well, Abel, this has been an hour and 30 minutes,
Yeah.
but for anyone who is listening, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for watching and listening. If you liked the show, please leave a review on dude, it's been so long. I don't even remember what. where you're supposed to leave a review. I think leave a
Apple,
review.
Spotify, YouTube.
Yes. Leave a review, like, and subscribe on YouTube now that we're on YouTube. And yeah, we'll see you in the next video. Peace.
Thanks, everyone.